the topic of today's presentation is an application of appreciative inquiry in undergraduate economics education, as you heard. And let me quickly walk you through the main outline of our paper and presentation. So beginning with the introduction, then the motivation for study, then the basic research question that we are trying to address, followed by objectives, some literature, and there is, I think, growing literature in this field, particularly in higher education. Then the methodology or the statistical techniques that can be applied to study this subject, and finally results and conclusions. So let me begin by introducing the topic. Appreciative inquiry is not a very new topic. It came into being around 1987 at Case Western Reserve University. Professors David Cooper Ryder and Suresh Srivastav actually are the co-originators of this concept, which has been applied very successfully in many corporations. Essentially, the approach discards the deficit-based approach or the problem-based approach, which we tend to use in higher education, in particular, when we actually evaluate students' performance using certain structured metrics, exams, quizzes, tests, and then based on that, we think we know what their problems are, and then of course students evaluate the courses based on standard questionnaires, and this has been the approach that was and is still used worldwide. It's entirely based on problems or deficiencies in backgrounds or in skills. And that is the classical approach, and this is an alternative. So let me introduce very briefly the four-dimensional cycle of appreciative inquiry discussed by Professors Cooper Ryder and Suresh Srivastav. So it begins with a discovery phase, and essentially you are focusing on what you do best. So it's in higher education, it would be you look for peak learning experiences, and then followed by the so-called dream phase. You envision what the future can be, in this case what the future classroom can be or should be, and then we follow on from there to the design phase, where we think of co-constructing what in this context the ideal classroom would be. It would be a multi variable or a multifactorial approach. And then finally, there is the destiny phase, which is summed up best, I think, by the word improvisation, to use a metaphor from jazz. And then, of course, once we have this framework, then let me walk you through the motivation for study. The motivation is that it's all very well to say these are the problems or these are the deficiencies, but we face a very heterogeneous student population. They come from different countries, they have very different backgrounds, and we don't know what their past experiences are. We only can make some vague conjectures, and this approach does not seem to work very well for all, lock, stock, and barrel. And that's the whole point. So the fundamental research question is, how do we improve the teaching and also the learning experience? How do we improve the teaching pedagogy and make students co-participants in the whole teaching and learning process using this model of appreciative inquiry? That's the fundamental research question. And I'll walk you through these objectives. Some of the objectives here are primarily to see how far AI can go in non-specialist economics classes, which we generally come across in business programs. And then how do you create the ideal environment where students can focus on specific components of their curriculum or their syllabi? And what is the student's notion of an ideal classroom? And eventually, the objective is to create the so-called ideal classroom, which I said is actually a multifactorial approach, because no two classrooms would be exactly the same, even if you're teaching the same, very same subject. And then I'll walk you through, I don't know if you can see the screen, the letters are a bit small anyway. This is the literature on AI, which actually is vast when it comes to organizations, but not that vast when it comes to higher education. You can see the references to Cooper Ryder and Suresh Srivastav, that's 1987, Appreciative Inquiry in Organizational Life. And then from there, we have cited a few other studies, namely by Beatty, then Knox and Carter back in 2015. In terms of organizations, I must mention that Walmart in particular and the US Navy have applied this technique very successfully. Walmart has used it very successfully in its sustainability practice. So that is one thing you may find, one thing you may find interesting. Let me scroll down to the next slide. In terms of what we see in corporations, this technique has proven to be very successful in enhancing revenues and profits and improving business processes. So there is very strong evidence for this in corporations. In the fields of higher education, we have not seen that many examples, but I think the literature is growing. If you take a look at this, here there are two studies which we've cited, Grandy, Holton, Paul McLeod, but I would draw your attention in particular to the second study, Hartman and Conklin. This is from the US, Georgia State and Illinois State University, and they actually found very strong evidence for what they called in creating the autonomy supportive classroom, where students were asked to participate in creating the course. And this was done through a semi-longitudinal study, so over time, but split into 2 or more time periods. And essentially, students were asked to identify peak learning experiences, which they then rated on a Likert scale. So I will now turn it over to Dr. Iqtidar Shah, who will continue from where I leave off. And then, we shall be very happy to take a few questions if you have any.
Thank you. Next slide, please. I cannot change the slide. If you change, please. Next slide. Yeah, thank you very much, Tony. Now moving forward with the methodology. So we use very simple methodology, and initially this approach was applied in the economic courses in winter term of 2019 and used as a treatment group. Then day first, when we started our classes, so we divide all the participants, students, into small groups of 3 to 4 students, and then the 4D phase was applied to each group. And we used the previous term for 2018 we used as a control group. And then later on, treatment and control group we compare in terms of student participation, engagement, grades, confidence, and satisfactions. Here I will mention that we have not used any formal data collection, survey or something, or any statistical techniques. So this is a short paper. Next slide, please. Background of the participants. So this approach was applied to 5 sections, almost 120 students, and almost students from the first semester. And we use 2 economic courses, microeconomics, macroeconomics, and the platform we use is Yorkville University because we are teaching there. So most of the students from Asian countries, and regarding the student background, so they are not familiar. Most of the students, they didn't study economics at the secondary level. And the students were generally not familiar with the social, cultural, and education system of Canada. As an instructor, we were also limited knowledge about the student language skills and their prior knowledge and ability in the course. Next, please. So the 4D model is, Tony already explained, so we apply here in each classroom. So the 4D model first phase was discovery. So we identified students' strengths and preferences by asking few questions, such as, for example, what is your favorite course, explain why you like the course and how was your preferences and score in the course, who was your favorite teacher, why do you like him or her, what are his characteristics. So we ask them to explain why any best learning experience you have enjoyed and achieved your goal in your previous classes, indicate your prior knowledge of economics, indicate your mathematical and analytical skills. Also, we ask them to explain your study habit and how you allocate your time optimally. And then do you prefer verbal instructions or explanation or visual teaching? All these things was actually relevant to economics, because in economics, we use mostly visual learning, usually involve graph or involve mathematical, analytical skill involved. So we ask these just to know, to discover from the student their strength. And this is good for the teacher. Next slide, please. So what were the outcome of this first phase? It was really a very creative and productive phase. Each group created a list of student strength. Later on, we compile all these. The list provide a set of guidelines for the students and teacher on how to move forward. We understand students' strength in the course, the level of students' prior knowledge in the economics, kind of teaching methodology, and the specific attributes of a teacher that students generally like. Most students express the opinion that their favorite teacher was very friendly and supportive. And each group stated that the teaching methodology should be combined with the visual learning techniques and explanation with example from the real world. Next, please. Then we applied the second phase, which was a dream. So based on discovery phase, the group were asked to dream for an ideal class. Students share some of their dream for what would be an ideal class. So the finding include, for example, they ask for more grades, minimum assignments, learning activities, assessment criteria, class discussion, group learning, extra classes, active learning, mutual respect, teacher attitude, and class environment, and regarding the resources. So most of the students wished for high grade and fewer assignment. But anyhow, we explained to them that the number of assignment and other class activities would be followed as per syllabus, because it is already approved by the university. Anyhow, we promised them that we can give relaxation for dates in the assignments and relax them in case if they are ill or if there is any emergency, and we will provide rubric for each assignments. Next, please. Then we apply the design, the third phase. So based on discovery and dream phase, a collective vision was designed for an ideal class. And this the student did by themselves. Later on, I will show you how they designed. The last PPT will be there. So the plan was based on student strength and what they dreamed of in respect of an ideal class. The plan developed by all group collective is analogous to a checklist for student success. The collective vision represents a commitment towards student studies. Next, please. So the fourth phase was destiny. The final stage of appreciation inquiry is students' commitment to the inspiration that they agreed upon. Each participant stated implementation of their collective visionary plan in this phase. Throughout the term, they followed the plan because it was like an agreement with themselves and with the course instructors. An attempt at deviation from the plan was negated by reminders about the agreement that had stuck by the two parties. So it was like an agreement between the teachers and the students. Next, please. The last one.
15 minutes, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So the last was conclusion and result. The approach worked very well from the perspective of both student and teachers. Teachers generally understand the basic academic touch point that allows students to perform better. An opportunity was given to the student to fulfill their dreams for an ideal class. All students showed renewed commitment and enthusiasm in the class activities. The approach increased student participation, teamwork, interest, attendance, curiosity, a more proactive approach and timely submission of assignment. The approach developed a symbiotic academic relationship between student and teacher that immensely enhanced communication, understanding, and trust. The approach clearly illustrates the mechanism of the transformative shift of the teacher mindset from the common deficit approach to student strength-based approach. The last one is the shortcoming or the limitation. So the study was limited to 5 group of economics classes. It would be useful to apply this approach in other disciplines to check the efficiency and effectiveness using proper data and statistical analysis. At the end, you can see the references. These are the references we used. Go ahead, please. And these are the collective plan, as I explained earlier in one of the slides, that the student make, and we actually is a teacher and student sign. That this will be the plan. Both parties will work on this. Last one, please. So thank you very much. These are our, you can see the emails for any questions later on. You can ask for any questions. Thank you very much. Over to you.